All right, you're all good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this lightning talk. I'm Matt McLeskey. I just finished my fourth year as assistant professor of criminal justice in the Department of Criminal Justice. I've been teaching the senior seminar in criminal justice for the past 2 years, including in a variety of modalities: semester, quarter, fully face to face, hybrid, online asynchronous during the 7 week quarter. I'm teaching it this summer during a 6 week summer session, online, asynchronous. So I've been teaching it a number of modalities and for a number of semesters. In the senior seminar for criminal justice, students develop, as they do in many senior seminars, an independent research proposal coming out of the previous two required courses in the department: CRJ 333, Crime Theories of Victimization, which is our theory course, then CRJ 387, Research Methods in Criminal Justice. In the most ideal world, they put those things together and develop a research proposal. So this year, I was also part of the AI community of practice. And so I worked on integrating more formally AI into my senior seminar instructional materials and forms of evaluation. So I'm going to share my screen with you and show you uh, the screen write up, or the assignment write up that I did once I figure out what screen I need. All right, not there. Why is technology so hard? There we go. So this is the assignment write up that I developed both for CRJ 401 and for the AI um, community of practice. And so the biggest thing I've been finding that we know students have been struggling with, or us as instructors have been struggling with using AI, is one, intentional or accidental plagiarism, and two, that students are not using this as a shortcut that results in a lack of learning. So, of course, as Nicole just mentioned, AI is a great tool, but it can't be a replacement for what students are being asked to do. So in CRJ 401, I have students basically write a anywhere from about 15 to 22, even 25-page research proposal that has all the constituent parts of the traditional social science journal article: introduction, literature review, research methods, uh, findings. In this case, it's projected findings because they're not doing the actual field work. And then a conclusion section that involves a discussion and a policy recommendations or policy implications section. So in the literature review section, what I've been finding is that students will use AI to do the literature review for them or to do most of it. So they ask for a summary of the research literature, even if they put in a very specific topic. So like I used an example here in Google Scholar: re-entry neighborhoods and crime. That's a classic criminological research topic. What are the pitfalls and what are the outcomes of people re-entering society who have been incarcerated? Plug that into Google Scholar, you'll find all kinds of stuff. So the basis of my assignment has been how to integrate Google Scholar, which I've traditionally used, with AI. So students are using AI as a tool and not as a replacement. So I'll come back to Google Scholar here in a second. Once I can get back to my Google Doc. So in my literature review instructions, what I asked them to do down here at the bottom, or once I find it, to get started, I asked them to get started with Google Scholar. So rather than asking AI for a summary, this is the big pitfall I've been seeing in senior seminar that I think translates to what a lot of people are probably encountering in their 300 and 400 level classes, whether it's senior seminar or something else. Students go to their AI tool, they ask for a summary of the research literature, even when they're trying to use it as a tool and using a very specific topic, as I just showed in Google Scholar. They're basically asking for a summary, even if it's a very synthetic analytical summary. They may even integrate their own prose and argument and analysis into that summary. They may forget to check to see if those citations are hallucinations. They may forget to check to see how contemporary some of those citations are. So to work around this, I asked them to get started with Google Scholar, and we'll do this in class. So the big intervention I've been making is rather than having students start with their AI tool and just plugging in some search terms, asking them to play around with Google Scholar. So I'm going to use this article here from Criminal Justice Policy Review from 2021 as an example. The big thing that I do with students in class is I tell them how the cited by link in Google Scholar is their friend. So this Criminal Justice Policy Review article, do released prisoners' perceptions of neighborhood condition affect reentry outcomes? We click on that. Well, that's going to give us the actual article, which is what we want. So the cited by link, this has already been cited 17 times. So what I really focused on this semester was, rather than having students find a whole combination of random articles, focusing on what has been cited by a key article they find that is useful. So this article right here has been cited 17 times. I only ask students to cite about 15 articles total in the literature review section for their research proposal. They do 12 for an annotated bibliography beforehand, and then I ask them to add to that. They have to add more citations for their research methods section and maybe for their policy implications section. But you could do really the whole literature review just based on what has cited this one article. So what I teach students is they find a key article, they look at what is great in its references section, what that article cites, and then what cites that article. So rather than having a whole random mess of things that they throw in to AI possibly, or that they get from AI, I ask them to download these and then upload all of these articles to AI to maybe then get a summary to see where they can intervene. Does that make sense so far? Does anyone have any questions? I feel like I just threw a lot at you. I'm happy to go forward if there's no questions. Going once, going twice. So in my article write-up, I focus on Google Scholar as a place to get started, and then they go to their AI sources. A number of the ones we're familiar with, some that we're maybe not so familiar with. This list here is from George Mason University Libraries that has all the major ones. Of course, we have Google Gemini as well, which I mentioned here in getting started. So obviously, ideally, students are not paying anything additional for AI use, although we know that they do. So because we can't stop students from using AI, this is one way to help them get around hallucinations. And so testing for information literacy, making sure that they have all scholarly articles, focusing on things that have a DOI number, the digital object identifier number. That's also something I stress, which I do, I believe, mention in my. So getting started, I tell them to focus on finding the DOI number. So that's one check that I have for them to make sure they're engaging in information literacy. If it doesn't have a DOI number, unless it's a book, then it's probably not a source they want to be using. So another workaround that I've shown students in terms of how to use AI as a tool, not as a replacement for their own work, although AI can assist with this, is really focusing on, in their literature review, breaking their research literature down into three major themes, just like we see in any major humanities or social science journal article. So first, I start with a professional example. And so this is typical sociology, criminology research. And I show them how to use this example. This article has subheaders of experiencing homelessness, stigma and salvaging of the self, the experience of homelessness in context with some subheaders, life on the street, experiences with shelters and service providers. There are other ones. And so then I show them a student example that's been anonymized. So this student, section on previous research, section on childhood trauma, punitive measures versus rehabilitation efforts, gaps in post-release outcomes for inmates. So while AI, you could plug all of your articles that you found into AI and ask it to give you three thematic themes. What I do as a way to get started is I have students do this in class as an active learning activity. I have them basically on a sheet of paper or on the dry erase board draw three buckets, and they have to come up with these three thematic themes themselves before going into AI. And so I have them ask questions: how do their articles differ? Where do they converge? Where are they thematically similar? How are the research methods similar? Quantitative versus qualitative? Do some focus on gender or race, while others do not? So I have them map out their articles themselves physically before going to AI for help. So these are two ways that I've been using AI for, ideally, active learning. I'm trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. There we go. So these are two ways that I've been using AI as a tool for information literacy and as a check against intentional or accidental plagiarism in the senior seminar course. So far, it's been going quite well. And the biggest thing I've been focusing on is doing more in the classroom with students, either in AI or not with AI, but more hands-on active learning things, helping them figure out how to map out the literature view one-on-one with me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. If anyone would like the Google Doc that I showed, that's my assignment write-up, I'll be happy to send it to you. Hopefully there's some helpful things in there. And I am done. End scene.
Okay, 10:30, we start our next sessions. Rebecca will be here in 2:15, and then actually pull up the schedule here. All right, so we have research acceleration with AI, which will be downstairs with David McLean, and then using AI to create personas here in 2:15 with Rebecca. And for our online folks, there are 2 separate remote sessions here. So depending on which one you want to go to, you would have to exit. You may have to exit this one to go to the other one. And we will start at 10:30.